Let's face it, we're just drowning in information online, aren't we?
Oh,
That
absolutely.
feels like a constant battle, trying to
Mhm.
figure out what's real and, well, what's not. It can seem impossible sometimes.
Totally. The sheer volume and just how fast everything spreads, it makes it incredibly challenging for, anyone to really sort through it all, to
Yeah.
know what to trust.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to explore this really fascinating world of using powerful AI models,
Mm,
the big ones like GPT-4, to maybe help with automated fact-checking.
mm-hmm.
Now, for you tuning in, you're probably someone who wants to get a solid grasp on things, but maybe without wading through tons of dense material.
Right.
So think of this deep dive as maybe your shortcut to understanding how AI is actually being used in fact-checking right now, what it's good at, and importantly, where it still needs to improve.
Yeah, and for this, we've been looking closely at a really insightful research paper. It's called The Perils and Promises of Fact-Checking with Large Language Models. It gives a great snapshot.
Exactly. So our goal today, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
We want to understand just how well these AI models can actually verify a claim, check if it's true, what factors make them more or less accurate.
Yeah. And I guess ultimately, what does all this mean for how we navigate information going forward?
Makes sense.
So maybe let's start at the beginning. Where did this sort of intense need for fact checking really explode from?
Well, this huge demand, it's really a direct result of how easily misinformation can just, spread like wildfire online.
Right.
Research actually shows that fact-checking efforts, they can genuinely make people less likely to fall for false news and even improve their grasp of political stuff.
Huh.
A big moment was back in 2009. PolitiFact actually won a Pulitzer Prize for their rating system, that clear scale they used. It really helped standardize things for the public.
Right. Yeah. The scale from true down to pants on fire. That's the one. It did make
Okay.
it much easier to sort of get it at a glance. Precisely. And then, we saw this massive surge in fact checking efforts after things like the 2016 US election, the Brexit referendum.
Yeah, huge events.
Huge. And it was largely driven by just the sheer volume of misinformation that went viral around then. Things like increased political polarization, a growing awareness of the real harm false information can do, that all fueled this focus on fact checking.
But okay, as vital as these fact checkers are, and we definitely saw that during the COVID pandemic, right?
I'll go it, definitely.
It's just incredibly time-consuming work. The paper mentions like a single fact check can take hours, maybe even days for a professional.
That's the absolute core challenge. I mean, given the immense volume of stuff being created and shared online and the speed, relying only on human fact checkers just isn't sustainable. It doesn't scale.
Doesn't scale at all.
And that's where the need for automated solutions becomes really, really clear.
Okay, so this brings us nicely to large language models, these LLMs, the advanced AI systems.
Yeah.
The GPT-4s of the world, they're getting seriously good at writing, finding information. So the natural question is, well, can they be our automated fact checkers? What's the potential look like?
The potential is definitely there, but we also need to be realistic about the hurdles. On one side, like the 2024 WEF Global Risk Report pointed out, these powerful models have unfortunately made it easier to create really convincing fake stuff.
Yeah, that's worrying.
It is. They talk about an explosion in falsified information.
Right.
Misinformation is now ranked as a top short-term global risk.
Wow. So the very tech that could help us find the truth is also making it easier to spread lies. That's
But
quite the paradox.
exactly. But on the other hand, these same AI models, they do offer the possibility of helping us identify and maybe reduce the spread of false information. That could lead to a more trustworthy information space overall.
Okay.
So the central question the researchers are digging into is whether these LLMs can genuinely tell the difference between accurate and inaccurate claims.
Now, the paper brings up this really interesting idea about data leakage.
Hmm.
Can we unpack that a bit? Like, could it be that when an AI nails a fact check, it's not really understanding it, but just remembering it, recalling it from its training data?
That is a critical question, absolutely. Because if their success is purely down to memory, right, then their ability to accurately check new claims, things they haven't seen before, well, that would be pretty limited.
Right.
The real test, the true measure of their intelligence here, is can they apply general reasoning? Can they go beyond their training data and evaluate novel claims correctly?
That makes total sense. You want an analyst, not just a digital parrot repeating things it's heard.
Exactly.
And speaking of analysis, one thing about AI that's often been a bit of a black box is how it actually reaches its conclusions, the whole explainability thing. How important is it for an automated fact checker to, like, show its work?
Oh, explainability is absolutely critical. It has to be. It mirrors the core principles of good journalism.
Yep.
When a human fact checker says something is false, they explain how they know, they cite their sources. Historically, a lot of AI models just haven't offered that kind of transparency. But encouragingly, there's been real progress lately in making these models more, understandable.
That's good to hear, because just getting a true or false verdict from an AI,
Yeah,
it's not super helpful if you can't understand why it decided that.
precisely.
So how are researchers actually tackling this whole challenge of automated fact checking? What are some of the main approaches they're trying out?
Well, there have been various research efforts, shared tasks trying to tackle different pieces of the puzzle. Things like rumor evil, CLF, check that, fever. They've provided data sets and ways to benchmark different methods.
Okay.
Generally, the process often involves a few steps. First, you got to identify claims that actually need checking. Then you find relevant background info, context, and finally you evaluate the claim based on that info.
And the paper mentions this concept of entailment. What's that about in this context?
So, in automated fact-checking, entailment basically refers to situations where the truth of a claim seems highly likely based on some piece of evidence, some text.
Okay.
While it's hard to get absolute certainty with, natural language, the goal is to figure out if the evidence strongly supports the claim or strongly contradicts it.
Okay, got it. So instead of just looking at the claim by itself, the trend now is more towards giving the AI models supporting evidence.
Yeah.
Like feeding them stuff from Wikipedia or search results.
Exactly. Giving the models access to evidence retrieval, that's become a really common approach. For example, researchers might use the claim itself as a search query, right? And then use the top results as supporting material.
Makes sense.
But a big limitation there is the assumption that all the information you retrieve is actually reliable, which, as we all know,
Yeah, not always the case online.
definitely not.
You could end up with an AI verifying a false claim using other dodgy info it found online. The classic garbage in, garbage out problem. The paper also briefly mentions using knowledge databases. What's the thinking there? Is that different?
Yeah, the idea with knowledge databases, or sometimes they're called knowledge graphs, is to give the AI a sort of broad, structured understanding of facts and how things relate. Like a huge map where points are facts or entities and lines show relationships, like Paris, capital of France.
Okay.
But this approach kind of assumes that all the relevant facts you might need to check any given claim are already in the database and represent it accurately, which, is often not the case for brand new or very specific claims.
Right. Reality is messy. Okay, so that leads us to the actual research study in the paper, where they tested GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 head-to-head, basically.
Huh.
What was novel about how they set up this evaluation?
Well, their study had two really key contributions, I think.
Mm.
First, they looked at how well GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 could fact-check both with and without access to outside information. That's crucial for seeing how much that extra context actually helps.
Okay, that makes sense. With and without.
And second, they developed this novel method where the AI agent itself performs web searches to find information and then uses that info to figure out the claim's accuracy.
So it wasn't just handed a stack of articles. It was actively going out and searching, like a research assistant.
Exactly like that. They use something called the REACT framework. It allows the AI agent to sort of iteratively search for information online, piece things together, and then decide when it thinks it has enough evidence to make a call.
That's pretty cool.
And importantly, the system can also explain its reasoning process step by step and cite the sources it used, which gets back to that explainability point we talked about.
Right, showing its work.
Yeah. And they were careful, too. They made sure to filter out any search results that came directly from fact-checking websites that were already in their test data, just to avoid that issue of the AI simply recalling the answer it had seen before.
Smart. Avoiding the data leakage trap.
Exactly. They used the LangChain library, apparently, to build this agent.
Okay, so they ran these experiments using a couple of different data sets, right? Let's talk about the first one, the PolitiFact data. What is that exactly, and what did they find?
Right. So the PolitiFact dataset is this big collection of fact checks, mostly focused on U.S. political statements, going from 2007 all the way to 2022. Each fact check includes the statement, who said it, when, and crucially, that verdict on their 6-level scale, true, down to pants on fire.
Gotcha.
So the researchers took a sample of 3,000 claims 500 from each truthfulness category just to make sure they had a balanced look across the spectrum.
Okay, balanced sample. Makes sense.
And
And their key findings. What stood out?
all right, so first off, they saw that GPT-4 generally did better than GPT-3.5 when the models had no external info, just the claim itself, kind of the baseline condition.
Okay, GPT-4 better out of the box.
Yeah, but when they were given context through those web searches, the agent did both models got significantly better. Their accuracy improved, and it also became better calibrated.
Calibrated, meaning
Meaning, they got more consistent at identifying both true and false claims correctly. It wasn't just skewed towards finding falsehoods, for example, more balanced.
interesting. So having that extra info really helped level things out and improve reliability for both models.
Exactly. Another interesting thing, both models were actually better at spotting false statements compared to true ones. That held up whether they had context or not.
Huh. Easier to disprove than to prove, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. They also, perhaps unsurprisingly, found it tougher to classify claims in those ambiguous middle zones, like half-true or mostly false. These often involve nuanced interpretation, things even humans debate.
Right, those gray areas are tricky.
Definitely. And related to that, the models really struggled to perfectly match the exact shade of truth that specific 6-level rating that PolitiFact had assigned. It suggests they have difficulty with those very fine-grained distinctions in veracity.
Yeah, the difference between mostly true and just plain true can be subtle. Okay, now the study also looked at how accuracy changed over time, which is
Yeah.
fascinating given the training cutoffs for these models. What happened there?
Right, this was really interesting. The accuracy for both models, both with and without context, actually showed a trend of improving over the time period covered by the dataset, 2007-2022.
Improving, even without context.
Yeah. For the context conditions, you could maybe attribute it to just more information becoming available online over the years, making searches more fruitful.
Sure.
But surprisingly, even without context, performance seemed to edge up slightly. Maybe the underlying truth of some older claims became clearer as more info just generally accumulated online over time. It's a
Yeah.
possibility.
Hmm?
But importantly, they didn't see any sudden drop in accuracy right after the official training cutoff dates for either GPT 3.5 or GPT 4,
Oh, okay.
which suggests that maybe ongoing refinements, post-training updates, or maybe just the way they learn means their knowledge doesn't just fall off a cliff on a specific date. It seems more continuous.
That's somewhat reassuring, I guess, about them staying relatively current. Okay, now they also did this whole other experiment using a multilingual data set.
Yeah.
Which feels crucial because misinformation isn't just an English problem, obviously.
Absolutely critical. Yeah, the second experiment used something called the Data Commons Fact Check Dump. It's this huge collection pulling from tons of different fact-checking organizations across a really wide range of languages. They found like 78 distinct languages in there from over 450 sources.
Wow, 78 languages. That's broad.
It really is. Now, to make comparisons possible, they had to standardize the truth ratings into a simpler 4-level scale. Just false, mostly true, and true.
Okay, simplified.
Then they filtered it down, focusing on languages that had enough fact checks to be meaningful, and importantly, they used Google Translate to create English versions of all the non-English claims.
Okay, so they could compare performance on the original language versus the English translation.
Exactly. And what were the key results here? Did the models handle all languages equally well?
I have a feeling I know the answer.
Yeah, not at all. In almost all the languages they looked at, the models performed significantly better. We're talking higher accuracy, better F1 scores. The works when they were fact-checking the English translation of the claim compared to the claim in its original language.
Wow.
And this was true even for claims that were originally about non-English speaking countries or topics.
That is a really significant finding, isn't it? It points to a pretty major language bias in these models.
It really does. It strongly suggests the models still struggle to properly, model, understand, and classify text accurately in languages other than English.
Mm-hmm.
And even when they were given context through the web searches, performance on the English translations still stayed noticeably better than when they processed the original language claims.
So context helped, but didn't close that language gap.
Didn't close the gap, no. But similar to the PolitiFact test, they did see performance improve over time in the multilingual data, too, again, with no sudden drop-off after the training cutoffs.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together then. What are the main conclusions, the big implications from all this research? What are the key things we should really take away?
Okay, well, the study definitely confirms that, GPT-4 is generally a more capable fact checker than GPT 3.5 was. That's pretty clear.
Right. Newer is better, generally.
Generally. It also really underscores how much accuracy improves when these models can access and use relevant context from the web. That boost is significant.
Context is king.
Absolutely. But it also starkly highlights this dependency on the prompt language. The fact that English translations often work better even for non-English claims is a major finding.
Yeah, that language bias seems critical.
It is. And while that question of, genuine understanding versus just recall, it
Right.
still lingers, right? But the fact that performance seems to continuously improve over time maybe suggests they're learning and adapting, not just reciting old data. It's complex.
Okay. And what about comparing across languages? Sounds tricky.
Very tricky. The researchers point out it's inherently difficult because there aren't really consistent global standards for how fact checks are done. Different organizations focus on different things, use different scales,
Right, comparing apples and oranges, maybe?
a bit like that. So ultimately, their research suggests that while these LLMs show, real promise as tools for fact checking, they're not yet ready to completely replace human fact checkers. The potential for errors is still too high.
So more like assistants than replacements, for now.
Exactly. They see the main role, at least in the near future, as assisting human fact-checkers, maybe helping with content moderation at scale, that sort of thing.
But the fact that these AI agents can now explain their reasoning, cite their sources, that does feel like a really valuable step forward, right? For trust, for verification.
Absolutely. That ability to provide explanations, that justification, that's a huge advantage of the kind of method they used. And the study suggests future work should really dig into when these models succeed and when they fail at fact-checking. And also, how can users like us use the AI's reasoning to sharpen our own critical evaluation skills?
Interesting. Okay, so summing up, we've learned that these AI language models, they're becoming powerful tools for fact-checking, especially when they have context. Big caveat, though. We need to be super aware of the language biases that exist and the fact that human oversight, human judgment is still absolutely crucial.
Couldn't agree more.
This deep dive has really, I think, shown a light on both the potential and the current limitations of using AI to fight this massive information overload problem.
It really has. And it reinforces the idea that, while AI offers exciting possibilities, our own critical thinking or human expertise, they're still absolutely essential for navigating this complex information world.
Okay, so here's a final thought then, something for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. Given how fast AI is advancing, how might our basic idea of truth, and even the ways we verify it, how might that change in the coming years? And maybe what responsibility do we all have as people consuming information, maybe creating it, to ensure these really powerful tools are used, well, responsibly and effectively? Definitely something to ponder.